I've never, ever, ever been without a bit of paper and a pen. For me, creativity always comes from observing everything, just having those bubbles of thought around your head, something you just heard, something you just watched, someone you just met, and suddenly two of those bubbles will burst into each other, and that's an idea, and that's creativity. Sometimes three of them bump into each other, and then you've got a hit. If your kid likes something, just let them do it. But they're not going to be a professional cellist. Okay, so instead of sending them to cello lessons, let them play Call of Duty. That's my message to parents. Listen, we're all weirdos, and it'd probably better that we just admit to it. And it's amazing how accepting people are the second you become your true self, right?
This episode is supported by Huel.
Well, Richard, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Don't ever feel like your best days are behind you.
Yes.
Reinvention is the purest form of hope, is a quote that I read ahead of this conversation, which just made me think of you. And I see you as a master of reinvention. So does that quote, reinvention is the purest form of hope, does that speak to you?
It doesn't really, and I'll tell you why. Often people overestimate me because they say, "Wow, you've been a TV producer, you created those shows, and then you're a TV presenter, and now you're writing for a living." You can do everything, but the truth is, those jobs are all the same. It's all the same gig, and it's just saying the right things in the right order, essentially, but in different formats. So for me, I've never reinvented myself. I have continued doing exactly what I've always done, but in new formats, essentially. So writing is understanding what an audience wants and doing that, though it takes a year to do. TV presenting is very, very easy, Jake, as you'll know.
Simple.
It's just talking to the camera, understanding what people want to hear, and TV producing is sort of somewhere in between the two of those, which is, again, it's all about what do the audience want, how do they want to hear it, how do you put that together? And the jobs I would say are very, very similar. So I don't think I've ever reinvented myself.
See, I think you're too modest, because my wife worked behind the scenes in television, and if someone had said to her, "Why don't you ever go in front of the camera?" that would be the end of her world.
Me too. I never, ever,
Really?
ever wanted to be in
So
front
there must
of the
have been an
camera.
element
Oh my God,
of-
never. I've never done stand-up, never done anything, never done any performing. I'm not an extrovert in that regard. Completely accidentally that I became a TV presenter, and entirely on my own terms, if that makes sense. I could be a TV presenter if I could be me, but I could never do the thing. I could never do the thing that you can do, which is you take on different gigs. You go out, you have to sort of understand slightly different things about who you need to be. I can only be me on television. In books, I can be lots of different people, but on TV, I can't go out there and say, "Hey, welcome to Saturday night, and this is the show where." I just can't. It's not in me.
But you still have to do the thing really well.
Yeah. Well, I've always done stuff that I love, and so you hope that you'd be able to do it well. So I make TV shows that I would watch. I presented TV shows that I would watch. I write books that I would read, and if you do that, then well is not really the question. It's are you being entertaining? And I never think about what's the craft here when I'm presenting TV. When I write books, I do, but when I'm presenting TV, just let the cameras roll and talk to your mate.
So would you tell us about that first opportunity you got in front of the camera?
Well, as Jake will tell you quite often, if you pitch game shows, quiz shows, things like that, if you tell people what the rules are, you can't understand them. They're completely, they're so complicated. So you play them through instead. So you go to the channel and you say, "Look, here's 4 contestants." I always had the producers playing presenters. So here's our show. And we did that for Pointless. And a guy called Tom Blakeson played the host, who's one of our producers. I played the co-host, and they loved the show. And at the end, they said, "Well, look, we need someone who's a bit like Richard to be the co-host, someone, knows a few facts, but can be funny, do a bit of banter." And somebody at the BBC, I don't know who it was to this day, said, "Well, why don't we ask Richard?" And so they asked me, and genuinely, I had zero interest in it. It's not something that, being in front of the camera is not something that ever interested me. But I thought, what was I, 40 years old? And, that's the reinvention thing, I suppose, is occasionally saying yes to things that you probably shouldn't say yes to. And I just said, yeah, because why not? It's a story to tell the grandkids in, 30 years' time. And 15 years later, I'm still on telly. So I'm glad I said yes in a way. But I could have continued very happily not saying yes, but I'm glad I did. That's the reinvention thing, is not closing off avenues, I guess.
So were there fears of saying yes, though?
It's a really good question. In a way, no, because I've worked in telly so long that I know almost all shows fail. And this was a show that was launched on BBC Two at like kind of 4:30 in the afternoon. So it's not a big kind of slot. It's not high profile. And I've made enough shows that only went for one series. So I just thought, would it be an interesting experience? Because I've not done it before. And it's a story. It's a story, for a party in 10 years' time. So I didn't have fear in that way. The first time I really had fear was sitting in the makeup chair and hearing my first live audience. I could hear the audience out in the studio. And that's the first time I just thought, because, I've sat in studios and heard a live audience 1,000 times. I hadn't heard it when I had to go on and talk to them. I just said that's not something that I had. So I definitely feared that. I feared being in front of the audience. I didn't fear being in front of the cameras because I've worked in the industry for so long. I've sat in front of cameras in rehearsals and all sorts of things. I know when I'm sitting in a gallery, I'm looking at people who are just in front of cameras. I see how they act. So that didn't frighten me particularly. But being in front of a studio audience, that frightened me. Even to this day, I'd rather do a show that didn't have a studio audience than did have a studio audience.
So what did you do to get through that fear?
I shat myself. No. Essentially that is what I didn't physically do that. But you have to live with it. You have to go, well, there's two choices here. Either feel that fear or go home. And you're not going to go home because look where you are. So I just, I sat with it. I went out there. I felt slightly uncomfortable. And then the next time I felt a bit more comfortable, and then a bit more comfortable, and then I worked out what I was doing, and then I didn't fear it quite so much. I've always, if I'm in front of an audience, I always have an insecurity. But, I definitely felt that, it was the best thing about saying yes was facing that and doing that, and something that I hadn't done before. And I think that was probably very good for me.
You see, you're very modest, and that's part of the charm, and I think why you've had a successful career as a TV presenter. Both of us have worked with people who we wouldn't describe as modest, right?
Yes.
In this industry, they are, they're not few and far between.
Yeah. Some people are modest.
Yeah.
So, but there are some that aren't.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. And some of them, by the way, are very good presenters.
Normally the better ones, actually, funnily enough.
Annoyingly, yeah.
It's a bit like sport. The nastier the person, the better they are. I used to hate that when I was in the pit lane or working in football. But what I do think is a magic that, you might not see because you're modest, is this idea of feel the fear and do it anyway. When I was young, I had a bad time at school and I was given a book by Susan Jeffers called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And that was the first time I realised, you can be scared, but still do it.
Yeah.
And looking at your story, both from when you were a young guy looking for an opportunity as a writer and now as a TV host and a podcaster and an author, I think all of it does come down to you feeling the fear, but doing it anyway.
I think a lot of it comes down to everything I've ever done really has been, you start out with a blank piece of paper. That's the thing that I'm comfortable with. I'm not someone who, I don't want to put myself out there and say, look at me or commission this or get me to write this article. What I like to do is write something down and then show that to someone and then say, we like that, we'll give you money for that. And the first thing I ever did was writing for magazines in my teens, and I would do that by writing a review for the NME, sending it off, and they would print it. And my first ever interview for TV, I would just write a load of program ideas, send them off, and they would read them and go, okay, that's great. The book, and I didn't sort of go to a publisher and say, I want to write a book, commission me, or here's a chapter of a book, commission me. I just wrote the entire thing, start to finish, didn't show anybody, just so it was done. And I could show them that and say, don't commission me, commission this. And so that's the way I've overcome fear, is to back myself up with something, always go into a room with something to sell that isn't me. Go into a room with the thing already there. So if they say yes to it or no to it, that's fine. It's not me, it's the thing. But if you produce enough good stuff, eventually someone says yes, and eventually someone buys what you're selling. And that's always been the way I've dealt with that. So I don't feel that fear in a way because I don't put myself out there in that regard. If I'm going into a room and selling, I'm trying to sell something that I've already created, something that I've been able to sit down, take some time over, think about, take some care over, and then you go in and sell it. And I love selling something that I believe in.
What if one box could change your running life? We've partnered with Huel, who've put together a running bundle to help everyone find their own version of high performance. It includes 8 Black Edition ready to drink, 8 Huel Complete Nutrition protein bars, 6 daily A to Z vitamin drinks, a free t-shirt, some running socks, and an extended trial on the Runner app. It's the perfect bundle to get you started on your running journey. So don't miss out. Grab your Huel running bundle worth over £100 at huel.com/running by clicking the link in the description.
So one of the things that we're fascinated by on the podcast, Richard, is what Sigmund Freud called the golden seed moment, that he suggested that anybody that goes to create anything, there's always a moment where somebody encourages them or nurtures that seed long before the seeds of it are ever evident. Can you think of a moment when your ability to be comfortable with that blank piece of paper started to manifest?
Genuinely, I can't, because I'm not from a family that has worked in the industries I've worked in. I'm not from a background where anyone worked in that sort of world. I've never, ever been without a bit of paper and a pen. I mean, don't forget, I'm 53, so I grew up when there was no TV on. You'd have children's TV for like an hour, so the rest of the time you're going to have to do something. Like, I would sit down with a pen and a bit of paper and dice and play little games and things like that. So I've always had it. I've always, and again, it's not something that's come to my family. I've always wanted to be in the conversation. I've always watched TV. When I watched TV, I was seeing who was on the credits. If I looked at books, most books in this world, people that say, "Oh, I love that book," I couldn't tell you who wrote it. I've never ever looked at a book and not known who wrote it. I'm fascinated with who is creating, what they're doing, how does that work. But there was something in the DNA, and my brother had it as well. He's a musician. Something in the DNA that I watched things on television, and I thought, oh my God, I mean, that's amazing. That's so exciting that people are doing that. And I never thought I could do it as well. But when it happened, when I started working in telly, I thought, well, of course, that's what you've been thinking about for all of these years. And my brother, just sitting and listening to records and, listening to this stuff and just reading music magazines. And of course, that's what he ended up doing.
Was he older than you?
He's, almost 4 years older than me, 3-4 years older than me. So we were both absolute self-starters in that regard.
But that's interesting, I think, the fact that you had the opportunity to see your brother do something that not very many brothers do, which is, perform in a band and have some success.
Yeah.
I wonder whether that made you think, so anyone can do anything if they...
Yeah, a little bit that, because, I always, as I say, I was writing for magazines and I was doing bits and bobs. And there was like an open access program on Radio Sussex, which you could go and do. And I went down and did that. So I loved being in the world. When Suede first got massive and they're on Top of the Pops, a bit of me did think, well, that's interesting because he's from exactly the same house I'm from. He's not just from the same background as me. He has literally the same background. He literally, he's got the bedroom next to mine. So there's no excuse now for me not to do it. But he was an entirely different world to me and is a very different human being to me. He's very much more get out there and get stuff done and very proactive, very front foot, really attacks the world. But yeah, there was definitely something there where you think, oh, that's interesting because I'm very proud of my brother and I like the way he goes about things. I feel I go about things in a similar way creatively. And I thought, well, he's done it. But I never thought now I've got to do it, or now I just carried on doing it. But, the moment someone started paying me was the moment things really come off, because otherwise, unless someone's paying you, it's not a lot you can do if you come from no money.
And when was the first time somebody paid you?
That was, I'd left university. We'd all moved to London because you got housing benefit back then, so you could all move to London, which kids these days can't do. And I had a job interview in the afternoon, like in media sales, like on the telephones all day. But there was an advert in the newspaper for a computer games television show, and I'd just written an article about computer games for a golf magazine. I mean, this is how random careers are, right? I mean, that's the point of it. You never know what leads to what. I'd written a thing about computer simulation games for this golf magazine. I saw there's this thing about computer games. I'm not a big gamer, but I thought, well, I've just written something. Why don't I apply to that? Went in there, and I tell you, genuinely the reason I got the job, which again is that thing of sometimes it's, you never know the thing that gets you, is the woman who's running that company. It was very reverse snobbish. And she looked at my CV, and I went to Cambridge, and she went, how could a guy who goes to Cambridge, how can you speak to someone on a council estate in Basildon? And I said, well, I mean, I grew up on a council estate in Billericay, which is about 10 miles down the road, so I think I'll be okay. And from that moment, that was it. I got the job and I never had a day off since, really.
Brilliant.
But again, when I got in it, I just watched TV all my life. And Jake will tell you, there's plenty of people in TV who don't watch TV. And so if you love it actually it shows through. It's not like you have to kind of do something special. It's just...
So what do you think it did for you, the fact you'd watched, and not just watched, but really observed TV?
Well, because the whole job of TV back then, when there was a bit of money around, was selling shows and selling new shows and selling versions of old shows, or working out what it is that people want, what's just been a hit, and you could do a similar version of what's just failed, and so a channel needs something filled. And those are things I just understood absolutely implicitly. People would sort of pitch things in pitch meetings. I go, but that's that show that's already on, and they wouldn't have watched it. So I had all this extra information. I had so I knew when you go in to sell to somebody, you have to really, really, really know their business. So you have to know your business, of course. You have to know what it is you're selling, but you have to really know their business, because they know what they're doing. They're all day. They're, if you run Channel 4, that's all you do for a living. So you're running Channel 4 all the time. So you're obsessed with Channel 4. You're obsessed with the ratings. You know exactly what's worked, what hasn't worked. So I have to know what they need and why they need it. And I have to respect they understand what they need and how they need it. And so I go in understanding them, understanding me, and somewhere in the middle, you sell something.
Every time you've mentioned selling, your face lights up a bit.
I love it. Yeah, isn't that terrible?
Well, no, it's great, because I think we're all salespeople.
Yeah.
People are either selling themselves or selling their goods or selling their expertise or selling their love to each other. So what have you learned about the art of selling that you think would be valuable for our audience?
I think you can't sell what you don't believe in. That's for sure. And sometimes you're put in a position in life where you have to. If you're working for somebody and you're working in a business where the product is not the thing that you would choose to sell. And in that situation, there's one job for you, which is work out in your head why it's not the right thing and come up with the thing that is right and start your own business in that regard. But if you believe in the thing you sell, understand that almost everyone won't want to buy it. And that's absolutely okay.
Why is that important?
Because you can get obsessed with an idea, and you can get obsessed with you being right. You can get obsessed with, I've got this script and it's brilliant. I've got this game show and everyone's going to love it. And most people will not, because on any given day, they do not need the thing that you are selling. They just don't, and that's fine. But you only need one person. That's the truth. And if it's a TV, you just need the BBC to buy it, or ITV. If you've got a product, you just need Wix to buy it, or you just need Sainsbury's to buy it, and everything follows from that. So most people won't want to buy it. But if you just get that feel sometimes where you've got something, and if you don't know you've got something, don't go and sell it, because even if they buy it, it's going to be an absolute nightmare. But I've sold things that weren't any good before, and it's not a fun year afterwards. So believe in the thing you've got, and work out who will need it, and then go and talk to that person, and don't be pushy, because they want it, you've got it. Sit back a little bit, occasionally sit forward. I would always pitch with one other person. We would always do a dual pitch.
Because?
Just because a double act is easier. Listen, doing this podcast is easier, right?
Yeah.
Because you can come from an angle, you can talk to each other. It's just, you've got slightly different things that interest you, so that there's a triangle between the three of us. And presenting TV shows, it's always easier if there's two of you. There's a reason, that Ant and Dec are so huge, then, that Bake Off and everything that's presented by two people. And if you're selling, it is one of you's got to lean forward, one of you's got to lean back. That's the way I always think about it. If not physically, then mentally. So one of you's always got to be going, oh, it's so lovely to be here. And oh my God, we love Sainsbury's, and my whole family have shopped here forever. And it's a tough job. What's selling for you at the moment? That's interesting. And you're just gearing up for Christmas. And the other one is going, oh my God, I think this might work for you, this thing we've got. And, the other person goes, yeah, don't worry about that for the moment. Yeah, to tell us, what else is going on. It's just that your shop, you just opened a new shop, right, in Egham, and that's interesting. It's a slightly different demographic. How's that working? Chat. And you go, anyway, listen, this thing we've got. And you play different roles. Sit forward, sit back.
And why is the sitting forward, sitting back thing, why is that effective when it comes to selling?
Because selling is a relationship. Selling is understanding what somebody needs, which is what this person's doing. That's empathy. And the other bit is delivery, which is what you're doing. I would always pitch with a guy called Tim. And Tim was so good at this. So I would do the actual selling. Here's the show, and here's why it might work for your team.
Tim Hinks, is it?
Tim Hinks, yeah. Who's still in the business now and is the very best in the business. He's so good at it that I remember one time coming back from Channel 4 in the cab, and we'd done this pitch for a show, and I'd been doing the pitching, and Tim had been doing his normal, I go, okay, Rich, that sounds interesting, okay. And he was so good at it that the Channel 4 commissioner rang him in the cab and said, what do you think, Tim, should we do it? Like,
yes.
wow. Just like, yeah, I think maybe we should. Maybe we should. His genius thing was he almost joined the side of the commissioner whenever he had a pitch. He would like ask me questions. I'd pitch. He goes, yeah, but Rich, surely wouldn't this happen? And I go, well, I tell you, if that did happen, then X would happen. And he was so brilliant at it. And again, it doesn't work if the product doesn't work. It works if you've got something strong anyway, and you can have a bit of fun with it. But it's a bit of theatre selling, but it only works if you've got something you love. And if you sell something you don't love, it's such a Pyrrhic victory, because it's going to be no fun to make.
When have you done that?
A few times. We sold shows when Big Brother was absolutely huge, we could sort of sell anything for a little bit. And when Deal or No Deal was huge, we could sell anything. We'd sell anything that was like Deal or No Deal. And occasionally, because at that point, Endemol was growing and growing and growing and growing, and anyone with a big business knows there comes a point where all your investors want is growth. It's all they care about. It's not enough that you had this, extraordinary year. You have to have that extraordinary year plus 8% the next year. And so you're always looking for growth, and you're incentivized for growth and all that stuff. And so you slightly lose your mind when you get to that stage of a business. And so we would sell shows that sort of were a bit like Deal or No Deal. We did a couple straight after Deal or No Deal, a couple of Dutch shows that just didn't work, and we knew they didn't work, but they sold in the room, and the people were desperate for them because everyone wants the new
Another Deal or No Deal. Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas they didn't want the first Deal or No Deal, which the thing that was the hit, and so we sold them. And you really repent at leisure, because you're just making these shows. It's miserable for the people working on them. It's miserable for the presenters. It's miserable for the viewers. It just doesn't work. And that's you can fall into that trap. So I learnt a long time ago: don't go into the room unless you love the thing you're selling.
And what, like you mentioned the term failure a couple of times, Richard. Whether that's, you said all shows fail. You've spoken about in sales, you're going to get knockbacks far more frequently than you'll get a yes. What's your relationship with failure like?
I mean, it's I find it incredibly useful, failure. And it's funny because I came from the world of TV, where you can have a failure and then you can pitch something the next day. So actually it's quite a fast turnover industry, and lots of industries are like that. Some industries aren't. Books, it's harder. So my relationship to failure with a book would be different, because if the Thursday Murder Club had failed, I spent 3 years doing it, and actually I'd psychologically set myself up anyway and just gone, you know what, just do it. And so I'd have been okay. But a failure that you've really invested in that way is much harder than a TV failure. But failures are useful if you can work out why it's a failure, if you can work out what went wrong, if you can work out how to do it differently next time. You have to get that resilience, because with all the will in the world, most stuff doesn't sell, and most stuff that does sell fails. So it's you're not working in an industry that is 80% hits. You're working in an industry that is 95% flops, and you just have to make sure that of those 5%, you've got some of them. And so it's always annoying, but you have to embrace it. And sometimes failure is unfair. Sometimes you'll have a great show that doesn't go and should have done, but sometimes success is unfair. Something will come off and you just go, well, it's not for me, but I'm glad people like it. So you have to be. How
do you embrace it? Because it's a very common message from our audience is failure derails me.
Yeah. Failure is, this is it. So if you write a book, this is the fascinating thing. I was thinking about this the other day. I try and give lots of advice to people who think of writing, because it's a dream for so many people, but the barrier to entry is so high, because it's really, really, really hard to write a book. So it's a really interesting test case about confidence and about following your dreams and all of those things. So with books, and any writer will tell you this, and I'm thinking, you're halfway through a book, right? So I think I was, when I was halfway through this one, I really remember I finished writing one day and thought, oh God, this writing is so lightweight. This is just lightweight. I could just blow this plot away. There's no ballast, right? So 2 ways of dealing with that if you're a writer. The first way, which is the way almost everyone does, is going, oh God, I'm so lightweight. How come everyone else is so good and I'm terrible, but my writing is just fly away. I can't do it. So tomorrow I'm not going to write. Or what you should actually do, because it's what all writers have to do, is go, okay, so that's my note to myself for tomorrow. Add some ballast to this book, make it less lightweight. Or that voice usually when you're writing a book, and it goes for all sorts of things as well. That voice where he goes, oh, but the thing about you is you're hopeless at this, or your idea doesn't have that, or why is anyone going to like this, or this is not funny, or this is, not serious enough. Whatever it is, that's just you giving yourself a note for tomorrow, because life is not short of notes. When you hand something in, there'll be a million people give you notes, but you're giving yourself the first note. And if you can work that out, if you're writing, if you've got a book and you just go, oh God, it's hopeless, it's just too complicated, and I can't write I can't write characters because this character's terrible. Then great, well, that's your job for tomorrow. Go back in, and that's the thing to do, which is the hard thing. There's lots of fun things, but go back in tomorrow, take it as a note rather than a criticism, and go, okay, I'll work on that.
Can I ask you how you know?
Yes, every time you hand in a book, you think, oh, this is the one that's going to scupper my career. Because of course you think it's bad, because every project, everything you ever do, when you first have the idea, is like perfect.
Yeah.
Right? You're like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. And then, such as the way of ideas, there are compromises on the way, and there are production compromises, and there are cost compromises, and there are what the customer wants compromises. So all the way through, you have to, I'll just chip off a bit here, I'll chip off a bit there. But by the time you're ready for market, you're like, this isn't the beautiful, shiny thing that I had in my head, but it goes to market and then everyone buys it. You think, because they don't see the shiny thing. And it's like a first draft of a book, which, the first idea for a book, which is perfect, the first draft of a book, which is terrible, and then somewhere in the middle, you come up with a book. And whatever you think about it, readers will immediately tell you if it's good or not. But yeah, everything is compromise.
And have you learned to ask yourself certain questions to work out if things are good or bad? Or is it an intuition?
Yeah, it's an intuition. I'm very vibes-based in everything I do, really. I just think about what would people like. My taste is very mainstream, so I just think, well, would I like it? I have my American editor. You get notes from UK and American editors. Like mine come at the same time, which are always super, super useful. And my American editor will usually only write 2 words through the whole manuscript, and they're so incredibly useful. Just twice, just at various points. So you write brackets, bored. And that's the greatest note you can have. She's not saying how to fix it or anything like that. And I'll look at the bit she's bored, and I'll go, oh yeah, because that scene beforehand doesn't need to be there. Or actually that character there, the motivation changes because I cut out the bit that she did earlier. And you think, yeah, so you're bored. And that's all you need to know in a book is, are you bored? Listen, you can either write or you can't write. But the one thing you should never do is bore people. So a simple note like that is incredibly useful. Which is, so anytime she just brackets bored, I sort of rub my hands with glee because I think, oh, great, because this is going to make the book so much better.
So if you shout bored in the middle of our interview, we know there's a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
We're failing.
We get the message.
Yeah, but you know what the equivalent of that is on television, which is, okay, Jake, move on.
Yeah, exactly.
And you go, yeah, but I'm really enjoying talking to this guy. Yeah, if we just move on, Jake. And you're like, what? Huh? It's always a good note, and but to give that note, you have to have good people around you, which is the key thing you learn from TV. Is just
and that was a question I wanted to pick up on. That, like, you obviously have a relationship of trust with your editor to know that their intentions are aligned and for you. And
they trust me as well, which is great. So they're not. You never get panicky notes on the books because they know. They'll say this and they'll know I'll go away, and a week later they'll have a new version which they trust. But that's the whole thing with TV and with most industries, and you guys will know it, is find people who are more talented than you, find people who can do something you can't do, and just hold on to them for dear life and hope that you do something that means they'll keep you around. But that's the thing. Every time you find someone who's incredibly talented, who's happy to work with you, it's free money. It's you sit there and someone else does something brilliant and you just think, well, that's great because I've just made a load of money and didn't do anything. And equally, that you hopefully, occasionally, I'm not looking at either of you, do something as well that they say, oh, that's great because I couldn't do that. So my career advice to anyone is, anytime you find someone brilliant, just, God, hang on to them and hope they want you around.
Today's show is sponsored by Vanta, the all-in-one trust management program. Now, here at High Performance, we've tried really hard to create a safe, trusting environment for our guests. And that's why we've teamed up with Vanta, because whether you're just starting or maybe scaling your company's security program, actually having top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. And Vanta automates compliance for ISO 27001, SOC 2, GDPR, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. As well as that, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all of it powered by Vanta AI. Over 8,000 global companies like Flow Health and Cora, they use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Click the link below or scan the QR code on screen to get $1,000 off Vanta. That's $1,000 off Vanta by clicking the link below or scanning the QR code.
And when you think back to your brother in a band in the 90s, you're fresh out of uni, being around it, what kind of lessons did you learn from him? Because he was at the point of Britpop. And
yeah, he really was. I mean, it was exciting. I learned we're very different human beings because I'm very introvert and he is not. I learned that that's not an industry. I think that's a particularly healthy place, I would say. And I don't like the way they were treated, and I don't like the way that industry works. And I wouldn't want to be in an industry that works in that way. So, I learnt some cautionary tales from him, but we are very different human beings. My brother is an artist and I'm a entertainer. Right. That's what, and both of those are perfectly valid. I just love as many people as possible to like something, and I like them to like it as much as possible. And if they're watching it, to keep watching, and if they're reading it, to keep turning the pages. That's the thing that I like. And my brother likes to create something that's never been seen before, and to do something and introduce something to the world that is unusual and, that no one else would have been able to do. That's what he loves. It's what he loves in his music. What he loves in his writing as well. So we're very, very different human beings in that regard. But I genuinely, and I know it sounds stupid, that thing of what's the golden seed? What did you learn from your brother? Every single bit of it was in me from the first moment. Every single bit of it, which is, my God, I'd love to just be somewhere in this conversation. I don't want to put my face forward. I don't want to sort of be exposed. I don't want to be on stage, but I just want to be in the middle of culture, because I grew up with it. You grew up with the television and the music charts and books and all this stuff, this incredible world. And there's something about it that for me, it was so seductive, and I just wanted to be involved, and I didn't know that I could be, and I ended up being involved. But the key is I'm involved by doing stuff that I love and making stuff that I would consume myself, and that thus far it seems to have worked.
But I think there's a fascinating bit of it around that you, so whether you were deliberately immunised from it, whether it was your mum's influence or you just didn't spot it, that nobody told you couldn't do it. Nobody was trying to shoot down those dreams and ambitions.
Yeah, I think that's true, because at school, I wasn't very good. I can't play a musical instrument. I can't do languages, all that kind of stuff. I never did like an after-school piano class or French class. They just didn't exist when I was growing up. So I was never made to do anything. And I think my mum understood that if I was watching TV, so long as I was watching it actively, which I clearly was, and that was okay. You get parents now with kids when they say, oh my God, they spend all their time playing video games or something. You think, well, how do you mean? Do you mean like slack-jawed, or do you mean they're excited by what's happening and the next one is coming out and they know who makes it and they understand why it's different to the previous game and they understand, who's selling what to who? If they get all of that stuff, then let them play, because, they're going to know something that's going to be incredibly commercially useful in 10 years' time. And my mum got that's for sure. She understood, because she was a primary school teacher. She understood that by and large, if a kid is not interested in something, it's not going to end up being their career. There's a reason why Tiger Woods and Venus and Serena were prodigies and went on to do what they did, which is from the second they started being trained, they enjoyed it. It was the thing that they liked to do. And we've lost a million, golfers and tennis players who could have been the world champion, but just didn't really want to do it. And so you get to a certain age, you think, well, I'm not going to keep doing that. So, you've got to if your kid likes something, whether it's science, languages, musicianship, television, video games, just let them do it. We spend our lives people pay for education for their kids and all this kind of stuff to try and get the 12 GCSEs instead of 10. No one gives a toss if you've got 12 GCSEs. Whereas if they're playing video games and they understand what it is, that's the career they're going to do. They're not going to do Italian. They're not going to be a professional cellist. Okay, so instead of sending them to cello lessons, let them play Call of Duty. That's my message to parents. You know what I mean.
I've got a son. Noted this down.
But it is about.
You're more likely to make money in video games than you are in being a cellist.
It's true, but it's also about living with intention, isn't it? Like, I just went on holiday to Crete, and I actually was deeply depressed by the amount of parents at dinner with both kids on screens, but not just that, headphones on as well, but just like a blank expression, no communication with the siblings or the parents or anything. And on the beach, our kids were desperate to play Roblox. And we let them have an hour a day playing Roblox under an umbrella, but they were talking, laughing, chasing each other, coming up with plans, hiding from each other. And Harriet was like, I hate them being on screens. And I made exactly this point to her, but look at how they're being on a screen.
Exactly that. How exactly is it adding to their understanding of the world? Is it adding to their happiness? Is it adding to their sociability? Because we didn't grow up with it. We're obsessed with this thing of screens. And you want to go, we didn't grow up with every single bit of information in the world on a screen and incredible entertainment on a screen all the time. I mean, this is extraordinary. How is this not going to be different to how we grew up when we're running through the woods? You think, I mean, come on. As an introverted kid, if I'd had an iPad, I'd have been so happy. I'd have absolutely loved it. And loads of kids don't want to talk. They're not great at talking. Obviously, those kids make sure they do a bit, but sometimes just let them be who they are and let them do the thing that they want to do. And that endless thing of there's a character in this called Gary Goff who's a criminal, and there's a cop goes around and says your daughter's been bullying this girl at your school, and he goes, you know what, I'd rather she was bullying someone than on her bloody screen all day. And they're like kind of the great bogeyman, this incredible bit of entertainment and knowledge thing that's in our hands. And if you use them well, I mean, why would you not use that for an hour a day to do something interesting and entertaining and sociable? It's crazy.
Can you talk to us about the power of being an introvert?
Honestly, when I say I'm an introvert, and I do see the irony of it, because I'm on a podcast talking about being an introvert, so I get it. I do get it, I'm on television talking about being an introvert, but I definitively am. I'm happier at home. That's the thing that I like. I like being in the small groups of people, but the second I'm in a new place, I'm very, very uncomfortable. If you asked me if I wanted to go somewhere new, I would say no. The first thing I would ever ask if you're going to go anywhere is, how do we get home? That's the first thing I want to know. I'm very happy in my own company or in the company of the people that I love the most and just sitting there. So I am an introvert. For me, it's that blank piece of paper thing, which is I'm very, 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 very happy if it's just me and a blank piece of paper and a pen, because I've got the worlds are inside my head, and I can create things that I want to create. And for me, my creativity comes from my introversion, I think. So it's fine being an extrovert. Again, we start to say that extroverts that are weird. You think that's fine as well. It's fine to be both. We used to kind of slag off introverts, and now we're slagging off extroverts. You think, no, we're all something. So it's fine. No, I like it. I like spending time on my own head. I like spectating rather than participating. That's the thing I like, which I think is very, very useful for my creativity. For some people's creativity, being in the thick of things is important. But for me, creativity always comes from observing everything, just having all those bubbles of thought around your head, something you just heard, something you just watched, someone you just met, all these different things, just to turn a phrase you heard, just looking through a window and seeing something you didn't expect to see. They're all in little bubbles, and then suddenly two of those bubbles will burst into each other, and that's an idea, and that's creativity. And that's just two things that you had noticed come together in a way that someone hadn't put them together before. And that's it. You start writing, you start thinking of the idea, you start going, oh yeah, what would happen if? But to do that, which is why I think introversion is useful, the more bubbles you got, the better. The more things that you have noticed, the more things that just you picked up on or spotted somewhere that you've got going around your head, the more likely you are that two of them bump into each other. Sometimes three of them bump into each other, and then you've got a hit.
Well, I mean, as you're saying it there, I said to you off air that I've loved your Thursday Murder Club series, and I think one of the things I've enjoyed is the lovely turn of phrases that you have, the way you describe a certain conversation that the characters might have.
Yeah.
And so I can see that that's your ability to observe. How do we all become better at observing and listening?
That's hard because I'm very visually impaired, so I don't really see the things very well, and I'm an introvert. It's almost like that. It's hard for me to tell someone else how to do it. It's always, you remember, like they always think Glenn Hoddle wasn't a great football manager because he couldn't understand why the players couldn't do the thing that he could do. Yeah. He's just like, but just knock a 60-yard pass, Steve Stone.
Just do this, and he'd show it to them.
So for me, it's just absolutely natural the way my brain works. Honestly, the key is being interested. That's the real key, and life fascinating you and people fascinating you. I like people. I find people interesting. And by the way, I'm very happy to watch that on TV rather than see it in the real world. I'm happy to see people on television, because I'm an introvert, but I find that fascinating. It's being fascinated by stuff. It's being interested in the world. And if you're not interested in the world, that's also okay, because you can just go and do stuff, and that's fine. But if you want to create things, if you want to create something new, something unusual, you'd better be interested in a lot of things, because the things you create, usually it's because you've seen something that's similar that didn't quite work, or you've seen something you loved and you want to emulate it, or you met somebody, you think, I've never ever met anybody like that before, I never met anyone who said that, or it's interesting you should say that about Strictly, because that's different to what most people think about Strictly. I wonder if there's a show in that. It's just being interested in people, being interested in the world, being interested in current affairs, being interested in sport, whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is, but being interested in stuff. And if you're a scientist, scientists make science by being interested in stuff, by being fascinated with the stuff that they don't know or they don't quite understand, and working towards that. And, any creativity is that. It's the anything that sort of begs a question. Yeah. Where you go, I wouldn't have thought that. Oh, that's interesting. Or that show's interesting because I haven't quite seen that before. So it's just finding those new things and then, linking a couple of them together.
People are really good at hating the things about them that are different, right? Yeah. So it'd be easy for you to, and maybe you do, to hate the fact that you're tall, to hate the fact that you're visually impaired, to hate the fact that you're an introvert. But actually, when we sit and have a conversation like this, it's pretty easy to connect the dots and think that the reason why you're sitting here in part, and you're a great author, a TV presenter, a TV producer, had the career you've had, there will be a large amount of that down to the fact that you're visually impaired and you're an introvert and you're not happy with certain elements of your physique. And
I think so. I think there's truth in that. I think, listen, we're all capable of creativity. We're all capable of creating things. I think that the stuff about you that is wrong, I think, is the thing that gives you empathy. And that's the stuff where the things that you create have a kindness, hopefully, that comes from understanding the differences in people and understanding that other people feel the way you feel, but about their differences. So, I think that's good. I think being different gives you empathy. But by the way, the longer you live, everyone feels different. Yeah. Like everyone, no one feels, just everybody does. Whatever it is, you walk down the street and see someone who, to all intents and purposes, culturally would be perfect, and they go home and something's up, and they think, why am I weird? Why am I not like anybody else? Right? Everyone has it. In a way, mine's easier. I'm 6'7" and I can't see. At least mine is kind of right out there. It's easy to spot, but everybody feels it. Everybody. And there's almost more pressure on people who sort of look like they have the perfect life, but then go home and just go, but people don't know. But we're all flawed. None of us live up to the thing that we think we should be. And the things that we're naturally good at, we dismiss because we think, but of course I can do that. And the things that we're bad at are the things that we obsess about, because you think, other people can do it and I can't do it. And you think, you need to get that balance. I always like that quote that, we judge other people's highlights reel, and we judge our blooper reel. We're looking at what other people are good at, and we're looking at what we're bad at. And you don't need to. Find the thing that you're good at and cling on to somebody else who's good at something else.
What would you say, though, to people who really struggle to embrace their flaws or the things that they feel are flaws?
Yeah, I would say that join the club. I would say that. I would say, it's funny. So I feel uncomfortable being tall, right? Or being very tall, being 6'7", right? And there's no hiding away from it. You're always on display. I describe myself as a reluctant lighthouse. And my son is very tall. He's not as tall as me, but at one point it looked like he was going to be. And I said to him, and it's advice I don't take, I said, you've got two choices when you walk in a room, right? It's either who's that tall guy, or it's who's that tall guy who looks really uncomfortable about being tall. I said, you do not have a third option, which is who's that short guy or who's that normal height guy. It doesn't exist. And that goes for any flaws that you have. The things that you do to cover them up actually are the things. If you think you're weird, it's not the flaw that makes you weird. It's the things you do to cover up that flaw. Because actually, people are very accepting of whatever it is about you. And no one minds I'm tall. That's my issue. Some idiots do, but idiots mind if you're different in any way. And, you can't be ruled by them. But by and large, it's the things that you do when you go, I wish I was like this, or I need to hide the fact that this is wrong with me. I need to hide the fact that this is what I think. And then you start behaving in ways that people go, when you meet someone, you think, that's a bit off. What's up with that person? And always, it's because they're hiding the thing that either they're embarrassed about or that causes them pain. And once you understand that about human beings, firstly, you see human beings in the other way, but also you have to apply it to yourself, which is, listen, we're all weirdos, and probably better that we just, admit to it. And it's amazing how accepting people are the second you become your true self, right?
And has this sense of acceptance always been with you, or is it something that you've learned in your later years?
Incredibly hard one. But that's the problem. You can't tell, and this is, you can give advice all you like, but until you live it, you don't really. That's the same with any therapy, isn't it? If, you can read a self-help book and go, oh yeah, that's me. And you can remember it for a couple of days, and actually it runs out and the sands kind of run away. Yeah. The second that you're sort of led towards a realization or led towards an understanding of who you are, and you go on a really long journey, and you are the one who makes that final leap that goes, oh, do you mean that X? That stays with you forever and ever and ever. And that's what good therapy is. And I'm glad there are sites now where you can find therapy, in a cheaper way, in a sort of more user-friendly way, because that's the only way you ever change. It's always when you learn something yourself rather than you are told something. We know that with kids. We know that with everything. You have to learn yourself. And once you learn yourself, you still mess up. And, you've still got that shame and that pain, but at least every time in your head, two things that are going to happen when you feel that pain and you feel that shame. One, you can go into that defensive behavior you've always done, which is why people think you're weird. Or two, you can go, I'm about to go into that defensive behavior I always do. I won't do that today. And, so the feelings are exactly the same, but your actions are different, which is you accept it, you're conscious of what it is that's up with you, and you do something about it.
Would you be able to share with us the moment you had the realization?
After years of expensive therapy, that's the problem.
But what was the moment? Like, what was the thought?
Here's my very, very, very first. And it's a well-worn phrase, but it's absolutely true. My very, very first thing of therapy, and I went into therapy thinking what everyone thinks is, oh, you won't crack this, mate. You won't have come across anything like this. You'll find I have problems you have not heard before, or I have them in a shape you haven't quite seen before. And the truth is, we're all roughly the same. We are, and therapists have seen all of it before. And I was justifying why I was how I was, and the things that made me unhappy. But this is how I am, and blah blah blah. And I'd explain away why I behaved in the way I behaved. And the therapist just said right at the end, again, we've heard it before. How's that working out for you? And you go, oh, what? Oh, since you asked, it's working out really badly, which is why I'm here. And then you go, okay, I got it. And like a therapist is like a personal trainer, which is, okay, I'm in your hands. I will do whatever you need to do. I will do the reps you tell me to do. I'll do the exercises you tell me to do. And then one day you start going to the gym without the personal trainer, and you do the things that they said, and then you think, oh, I'm actually going to try that machine as well. And because you built up your core from the exercises they told you, suddenly you can do something else. Then you get back to the personal training, they introduce a few more things. Then next time you're in the gym, you think, oh, I'm going to have a go at that one. And that's what therapy is. It's building up those muscles which atrophy, because when we hide away, which people do, we're not exercising our real muscles, are we? We're just doing this hiding mechanism.
And can you share with us any tips or techniques that your therapist worked with you on that our listeners or viewers can maybe consider adopting?
Yeah, honestly, I think the key thing is being conscious of when you are hiding away. So shame, I think, is the biggest thing. So however you experience it, whatever that means to you, the thing where you go, I don't want people to know this about me, or when this comes up, I get embarrassed, I want to run, or I want to make sure that people don't understand. I'm going to hide. I'm going to hide this part of who I am. Okay, which is shame, and there's no way through shame other than, you have to become conscious of it. That's the first thing. So every time it happens, you go, that's interesting. Yeah, that is a pattern. Actually, you said that I do that, and yeah, I buy that. You still do it at that point, but it happens enough times that you kind of go, oh, okay, I could actually probably not do that this time. So what I think it is answer the question, am I weird? Right? Yes, you're weird. Definitively, you definitely are weird. No getting away from that. Why am I weird? Right? And you think, it's because I've got this thing about me that no one could ever know. Okay, no, that's not why you're weird. That's who you are. Why you're weird is because you're doing everything you can do to hide it, which means you avoid certain situations, you avoid certain conversations, you avoid certain behaviours. That's why you're weird, and that's the thing that people are picking up on, is you hiding it. And the second you can just get inside that relationship between why you think you're weird and the fact that you covering up that means you're weird, the second you can kind of start to unpick that, that's a journey that's well worth going on, I would say. And it's still, whatever it is about you, it's still embarrassing. Yeah. You're going to live with this stuff forever, whatever it is that you have. But I mean, we're not here for long. Living through shame just doesn't, it's not worth honestly, the other side of it, the other side of shame, even if it feels exposing or embarrassing, it is much more fun, and your life will be much happier and, much more successful, I think.
What was causing your shame?
Lots of things. The height. I would overeat. So I'd have like food addiction issues, which is like sort of mortifying, especially for a man, and stuff like that. That's kind of mortifying. And of course, it comes from somewhere. It comes from childhood pain, and that doesn't really matter where it comes from. The behaviour you use to cover up your pain is the thing where you suddenly go, oh my God, it just no one's like me. I'm so weird. It's absolutely mental. And you think, of course, all we're trying to do all the time is protect ourselves, right? It's quite hard to live. It's quite painful to live as a human being, isn't it? When you think about it, waking up every morning, there's billions of people.
There's a lot going on.
You've got people to look after. People want stuff from you. There's not enough money for something. 10 different people need you to be 10 different things. Our brains are quite small. We're not amazingly great at kind of working out what's going on around us. So it's hard to be a human being, and we all have protective measures that we put in place. And if we've gone through pain, we have further protective measures. And whatever that behaviour is, and you see it in famous people, you see it in politicians all the time. We had a prime minister recently that has every addiction going. You can see he had every addiction going. You see he was running from pain, and he chooses to act out by sort of going, actually, I don't care about anything in the world, and I'm going to be, I'm a joker, and, I'm going to cause trouble, because he needed chaos, whoever this prime minister was. He needed chaos to hide his unhappiness. So some people, when there's unhappiness, they hide. Certainly what I did, and I think most people do. Some people, if there's unhappiness, cause absolute chaos. And people will know this from relationships they've had. Yeah. If somebody's causing chaos, right, it's not because there is chaos, it's because you can hide in chaos. If you are having a row where someone is causing chaos, then you're not having a row. They're avoiding every bit of it. If they're just ramping up, causing drama, it's because they don't want to play on the real playing field. So some people hide. I definitely hide. And some people, and once you work it out, you see it everywhere, hide in chaos. And you look at some of the people running the world at the moment, they constantly need chaos. They constantly need argument. They constantly need things to be shifting, because it means they can't sit still. And if they can't sit still, they can't ever be caught. And if they can't ever be caught, don't ever have to look at themselves. And so that's my take on the ways that you can hide from what causes you pain.
That is so interesting, because I've often struggled with this idea that people say, oh, I bring chaos into my life, or, I seem to attract chaos, or I cause chaos. And I've always thought, well, just don't cause chaos then. It's that simple, just stop doing it.
But it's like, it's, again, a relationship one is a really good, if you've got a friend who's got a partner who's there's constantly some drama, constantly there's some, there's a guy and he's constantly saying, like changing arguments into things they're not. If you're having an argument, it should be like a football match, 11 people against 11 on a playing field, and you find who wins at the end, and that's the person who was right about the argument. Right? If you've got someone who knows they're not going to win the argument, right? If you know for a fact you're not going to win the argument, you only have one option, and that's to slope the pitch, is to put 15 players on the pitch, is to throw 3 more balls on the pitch, is to absolutely constantly change the rules, because then the game gets called off. Because if you can't win, if you know that you don't have the wherewithal to win whatever the argument is, you cause chaos. And these people are everywhere, because culturally as well, it's applauded these days. People like these people who I'm a disruptor. I don't play by the rules. You think there's a reason you don't play by the rules, because if you play by the rules, you're fucked, because you're hollow. There's nothing there. You're unhappy. And what you need to do is sit down, talk to somebody, and find the love that you didn't have when you were younger, or whatever it is.
Can I ask you about your coping strategies, though? Because it sounds like the eating disorder was a coping strategy in some way. Yeah. What did you learn about managing that, and have you replaced it with anything else?
Yeah, I think food is particularly tricky. I mean, it's alcohol and drugs. We know what the solution is, which is complete abstinence. It's it's an incredibly painful process and very, very difficult process, but that's the rule. That's what you have to do. In food, you need food in the same way you need love, and so those are harder things to deal with. It's sort of having rules. But anyone who's an addict in any way, again, that's when I talk about chaos and I talk about how difficult it is to be a human being. I know that those behaviours are ridiculous, right? So I know that it doesn't make any sense that you would overeat, or you would eat to dull pain, whatever it is, whatever sets you off. And you think, well, I do that, and I'm a reasonably intelligent, together human being, and so everyone's doing stuff like that all the time, and that's because everyone's just trying to get through the day. And so I think if you have any sort of addictive behaviours, you do start to understand that everybody's struggling and everyone's battling, and your behaviour is so stupid, you can't really judge other people for behaving in ways that are unusual or seem counterintuitive, because we're all doing something. You look at lots of the anger in this country at the moment. I look at a lot of the online stuff, and people get very angry with trolls and stuff like that, and you think, again, these people aren't evil. This is the thing that they have to do, because the alternative is, there isn't an alternative. The alternative is peace and quiet. The alternative is sitting with themselves, and they're not capable of doing it. They constantly have to be trying to get a reaction, trying to provoke, because then they don't have to just sit by themselves, and never underestimate how much happens because people don't want to just sit with their own thoughts. And if you're a troll, you can easily spend the whole day getting a reaction from people, writing to 50 different people 50 different times, and somebody will pick up the bait, and that's it. That's another day done where you haven't had to sit and look in the mirror. And so I kind of see where these behaviours come from, and I never think it comes from evil. I think it comes from unhappiness.
Yeah. Because the reason I ask, like Jake and I were both talking before we sat down with you, and I was looking at your prodigious output and thinking, this guy's a workaholic. But from a selfish point of view, we were like, we think we are. So we're actually coming to you for some kind of advice.
No, I'm really not. I work very, very, I work smart, that's for sure. I like to get absolute maximum output from the input that I put in. But no, I have a lot of downtime. The greatest compliment anyone can pay me, again, you get it online, is, well, you've got too much time on your hands. You think, oh my God, yes, please, to have too much time on your hands.
Are you a procrastinator?
I mean, certainly, if I can do anything other than write, I definitely do that. So I try and write 2 hours a day,
Right.
but I'll leave it as long as I possibly can. If there's anything else I can do, I definitely do that. But when I'm working, and this is the good thing, it is non-stop. There's then I'm not procrastinating. I'm not looking at the internet. I'm also not spending hours researching and stuff like that. I'm literally writing, and that's my brain works in very, very short bursts, and these are a very, very long break in between. So I don't think I'm a workaholic. I love work, and I love the things that that I've been able to do. I love that, but I don't need to be doing it. A day where I'm not working, I'm much happier. So you guys are workaholics.
So no.
I
thought
that?
I was. I thought. Oh,
My
yeah.
wife would say that. Yeah, my wife uses that.
But why?
Yeah. Well, again, that's what exploring. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go
But
on.
you like it.
Why?
The inability to sit in a room quietly.
Yeah.
I like it so if I'm writing, I like the purpose of writing. I like preparing for an interview with this. I like reading your book. So the ability of not doing something without a purpose.
Is it a bad thing to constantly be thinking and on the go and planning? And
I don't know. I think it slightly is. Well, listen, it depends. There are addictions which are healthier. Like exercise is a good addiction, right? Working in a job that is meaningful is a good addiction. If you're going to have an addiction, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But, there's sometimes you've got to give yourself an hour. And people say, I know I'm going to meditate and completely clear my brain. The thing that people never do is say, no, I'm going to really focusedly think about myself for an hour. That's the thing that I'm actually going to do. I'm actually going to think about who I am.
do you do that?
And no, but therapy does that. So therapy, that's the point of it. You could just say, oh, great. In the same way that, going to personal training, you think, great, I can do that for an hour. Going to therapy, so it forces you to talk to somebody who, doesn't have any particular, stake in who you are, forces you to talk about yourself. And that idea that I just need to clear my mind completely is, by the way, healthy, and I do think that's good. But the one thing we never do talk about is, no, I need an hour when no one else is around, and I'm just going to think about who I am and try and think about it in a non-critical way. Because lots of us can sit around and think for half an hour of the thing we said at the party last night, and oh my God, what are they going to say about that? And that was so awful, I did that. And, that we find very easy. But just that thing of, who am I? What is it that I want? How am I working towards those things? How am I looking after the people who love me? How am I looking after myself? And that's that kind of focused thought about yourself.
Isn't it interesting that we talk so much now about therapy? It's easy to kid ourselves that we have a better relationship with therapy and counsellors and therapists than ever before, right? But I'm not sure actually that we do. I think we talk about it more, but we're all doing Baja salts and ice baths and saunas and LED face masks and kefir and gut health. How many people are actually doing all that and having just 1 hour a week where they go and speak to someone?
Well, again, it's very easy to read books and do have massages and think I'm looking after my mental health. And you think, yeah, I mean, I guess you are, but there's a better way of doing it. Listen, it's better than not doing it. If it makes you happy, that's absolutely great. But you're right. Again, some of that is evasive behavior as well, which is I'm getting as close as I can to therapy without actually doing therapy. Which, and by the way, that's what happens in therapy all the time. You get as close as you can to a particular revelation about yourself, or confronting yourself about a particular behavior. You think, I'm going to go right up close to the fence, but I'm definitely not going to jump it. And then sort of 4 weeks later, you realise that, you jumped it 2 weeks ago because your therapist knows what they're doing. But we all just absolutely go as close as we can. But I'm not actually going to change my behaviour.
How often do you see a therapist?
Now, not at all. But I did, for like 15 years.
Is that a good thing?
Yeah, I think it's, I feel armed by the things that he gave me. And certainly if there were a crisis, I would go back immediately.
I wonder whether you need a crisis to go to a therapist, though, or whether it should almost be as common as going on a treadmill.
Yes.
We'd all be a lot happier.
I think it should be as common. I think it's too expensive for that, and there's not enough of them, and that's a real shame. And if we took our minds as seriously as our bodies, then there would be, like, David Lloyd's all over the country for therapy. And and do you need a crisis? Yes, but I think we all have enough of we've all got a crisis somewhere in our brain, either crisis that's obvious that happened to us, or a crisis that we think no one else knows about and is our big secret, but everybody knows. It's like when I first sort of came out and started talking about food addiction when I was younger, and to the people who loved me, and they all went, yeah, but of course you do. We've known that for years. And the behaviour I'd done to pretend that I didn't turned me into what people would call weird. Right? That was the weird thing about me was not the food addiction. The weird thing about me was covering that up. That was the thing that was weird about me. And, you know, I think that's very, very, very common. You know, the thing that we are hiding, we think is the weird thing, but it's not. It's the way we try and hide it is what makes us weird.
I love it. Can we talk about your writing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You say you work 2 hours a day. I mean, that sounds like a dream for a start.
Yes.
So how do you make sure that the 2 hours that you put into your writing every day is a really elite, high performance 2 hours?
I mean, some people can write 8 hours a day. I get it. I couldn't do it. After 2 hours, I'm done. My brain is absolutely out, and we all have different brains. I'm very goal oriented. I'm word count oriented. The way I write, I try and write a chapter a day. I have shortish chapters, 1,500 words, something like that, which I find fun to read as well. If I'm reading books, I like short chapters, and so I'm super goal oriented, which is I would go upstairs and I would write a chapter, and then that will be done. And I find that's easy. And I know that a book is 90,000 words. My books are around 90,000, so I know I can obsessively keep up with the word count and know where I am and all of that kind of stuff. But it is, I'm not coming downstairs until I finished a chapter, but the chapter's not going to be 10,000 words, so it's not going to, you know, it's, I know I never thought I'm going to spend 2 hours. I go upstairs, I write a chapter, and it turns out that roughly takes me around 2 hours. Sometimes it's a little bit less, sometimes it's a little bit more, but I won't come downstairs until that chapter is done. So that's how I get through that. And writing, you have to have something psychological to get you through it, otherwise it would drive you insane.
And what's the hardest part?
The hardest part is that it takes a really, really long time. It's like, you know, I've spent my life on panel shows and things like that, and talking where it's the first thing that comes in your head is always the thing. There's that, like, essentially like the fast twitch muscle fibers of intellect are the thing that, you know, I can go on the B of bang if you need a gag, right? So I've got speed of thought. I don't have depth of thought, and suddenly I'm a sprinter who's doing a marathon. And I love it, and I love the discipline of it, and I love, you know, what it means. But it can be a real slog. It's a year of work for someone who's used to, you know, being able to do something in 5 seconds, and, you know, it exists on day forever. So it's a year of work. I find some writers plan out everything. They plan their whole story. They plan their whole plot, and that I can't do because, again, it doesn't suit my mindset. I need to be constantly surprised and constantly entertained.
Right, okay.
And so I tend to let the story kind of develop as it goes on.
Do you have an ending though before you begin? Like a rough?
I mean, sometimes. I mean, I've just started writing the 5th Thursday Motor Club book, which will be out 2025. And no, I definitely don't have an ending. I have a world that I want to be in. That's for sure. I have a beginning, but I've read enough books and I've written enough books now that I know it will come. You know, my books always start with character. Always. Who are the characters? Bring them in, get them to talk to each other, start to care about the world. And then there's a million plots out there. If anyone is sitting at home writing, people worry all the time about plot, but what's my plot? And your plots out there, there's a million crime plots. You worry about your characters. That's the thing to worry about, because that's why people read. People don't read because of the intricacies of the plot. They read because they're enjoying spending time in the company of the characters who are on the page, and then they really care what happens to them. So, yeah, you can only write the way your brain works. And my brain, I have very, very low attention span, so I write short chapters. I'm fascinated with people, and so I write from different perspectives all the time. And I need constant novelty, and so I don't plan ahead too much, you know, because I want to be constantly surprised. And so that's how I write. But you write how your brain...
Is it a cool feeling when your brain just comes up with something like, and you're like, oh, I can't believe you just did that?
Yeah, it's really great. I love it. And it's silly things. I was funny enough, I was doing an interview the other day with Lee Child, who writes all the Jack Reacher novels. I love Jack Reacher, and I love his novels. And I was saying, because you feel a fraud as a writer if you don't plan. But Lee Child doesn't plan either, and Ian Rankin doesn't plan. So lots of my favourite
authors done quite well.
And I was saying, I was writing a chapter, and I said, I thought, is this all right to say to Lee Child? And I said, I got to the end of this chapter today, Lee, and I wrote this like last line of the chapter, where I was like, oh my God, but what's going to happen now? And of course, I didn't know what's going to happen now. But as a writer, I'm like, oh, and he goes, oh my God, yeah, I do that all the time. He said, that's the dream. And then you just leave it and then think about what might happen now. Because if you're thinking that, the reader's thinking that.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing I love about writing is just, I've set myself a little challenge there of you just go, I mean, how is that going to pay off? Wow, that's crazy.
So can I ask you though, because like the bit that strikes me in your books is like in each of the books I've read, there's at least there's 2 lines that you'll use where I'll go, fucking hell, that's profound. Like I'll give you the example where you write in the second Thursday Murder Club, where you talk about some people are the weather, some people are the weather forecasters.
Yeah.
And I was like, I love that. I love that concept.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Is that just intuitive, or
Yes.
are you looking to weave that kind of?
No, it's all I think of it as I go along, and then if I got a line like that, which I find very interesting because it's true, and that's that chaos and hiding away things. Some people are the weather, some people are constantly thinking about what's going to happen. I think I write it in context of 2 people who are going on a city break, and one person's like, no, let's just turn up and go, we'll just do whatever we want, and the other person's like, no, I'm literally going to plan every single bit of where we're going.
Sounds like most marriages, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But their marriage works because the person who's planning doesn't tell the other person that they planned it, but they know exactly the walk they're going to do just to make sure their husband does see this and does see that and the things that she knows she wants him to see. But yeah, that idea of people being weather and weather forecasters, that's just, if you write interesting characters, then that stuff just comes out naturally because there are oppositions in those characters, and that makes you think about yourself and different relationships. And so I love being able to write. I mean, I've got a psychiatrist as one of my characters in the Thursday Murder Club, which is cheating really, but it's because he's allowed to say profound things. But no, I love it when the wisdom comes from different areas.
But there's some really interesting research by a psychologist called Keith Oakley. I don't know if you're familiar with this, Richard, about that he's researched it and said that when you read fiction, it increases our empathy skills, our range of thinking, and just our ability to be creative. And I think for people that are not aware of it, like you're writing about 4 pensioners in a retirement home, aren't you? And I'm interested in, where does your ability to be able to write for 4 very disparate, different characters like that come from?
Yeah, I think A, interested in people. B, I come from a big working class family, and I now find myself very, very firmly in the middle class. So you come across a lot of different people, and you see the things that are similar, and you see the things that are different.
Yeah.
And most people are the same, but most people's circumstances are definitely not the same. So I think a lot about people and about the world, and I think about how I love unlikely friendships, and I love friendships across divides and all of that stuff. And in terms of writing older characters, that's just, for me, there's instant, you get that instant thing of, we're aware of the lives that they've lived and the extraordinary things that have happened, and we're aware now they're being overlooked and they're made to be slightly invisible. So they're underdogs from the beginning, and I love an underdog. And so, I just try and find as many disparate places for people to come from, and then I throw them together and have them talk to each other. And that stuff just comes up. But there's all, bits of my head, I suppose, able to, the childhood me and how I was brought up, talking to the me now, where people go down the Groucho and stuff like that, and showbiz me, talking to me sitting at home and watch the snooker me, and you just all of those conversations are going on, I guess, but they're through characters, and so I don't even think I try and keep myself out of the way of those characters as much as I can, but I have to accept at some point that they are all me somewhere.
And have you? I'll tell you a funny effect reading those books have had on me that I didn't tell my wife about it last week, was because you're reading about people coming towards the end of their life and work that, like, you talk about Elizabeth, who at one stage was working for the spy services.
Yes,
No spoiler alerts.
No.
But at that time, her role was critical, and now she's almost redundant. And it made me feel a little bit funny about, none of this really matters, because in 20 years' time, nobody will give a shit anyway. And that's been the effect on me. I don't know if you've had a...
Yeah, I like that, because it's perspective, isn't it? And and you have to understand what does matter, which is friendship, and it's kindness, and it's so trite to say, and it's so kind of a phrase on a tea towel, but it just happens to be true, which is that we're not here to do anything particular, so we might as well look after each other. And some people are incapable of empathy, right? That's absolutely fine. That's that's how they're built. But those people who are capable of empathy, just try and use it as much as you can, I think. And I like the fact that it's about friendship. I like the fact that it's about understanding that, you must talk a lot on this podcast about, ambition, of course you do, and what drives you and all of that kind of stuff. And, what drives you in your 20s and 30s and 40s is real. Of course it's real, but it's also not real, because actually you reach the end of your life and you go, oh, actually that wasn't the thing that I was looking for. In your 20s, 30s, 40s, you're proving yourself, right? You're proving yourself to people who doubted you. You are dealing with whatever chip you've got on your shoulder. You are trying to show your younger self that you were capable of something you didn't think you were capable of. That's your rocket fuel. And when you're older, of course, it's waking up in the morning wanting to be happy, and it's waking up and is there somebody who cares that I'm here? And it's waking up and thinking, is the world a better place today than it was yesterday? It's those things, and that's fun to write because the other stuff is fine, and everyone's day-to-day thing, especially when you just have, kids or you got parents who are ill or anything like that. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of things that kind of take up your time and take up your energies, there comes a point in life where I think you can just slightly be a bit more serene about what the world is and about what human beings are. And so writing about both of those worlds is a real gift for me.
Are you the happiest you've ever been?
Yeah, I think so. I've always been. I'm quite a content human being. Again, which I think comes from introversion, because I don't. There's certain members of my family who always need to be out doing things, seeing people. They just constant, which is that extrovert thing. And again, that's not running from anything. That's just they need constant stimulation. And I'm happy at home with my wife and the cats and the snooker, and so I find contentment very easy.
Time for some quick fire questions to wrap up.
Okay, great. I'm not great on quick fire questions because I tend to rabbit on, but let's do it.
The 3 non-negotiable behaviours that you and the people around you really should buy into.
Non-negotiable behaviours, like behaviours you shouldn't do or behaviours you should do.
They're non-negotiable to you. These are the things that in your world are non-negotiable, that you have to deliver this stuff.
Yeah, don't listen to your phone out loud on public transport.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's my absolute number one. Where's that come from?
Becoming ever more popular.
But what has that come from? I mean, it's weird that's a thing that I genuinely don't get it. Anyway, that, I would say, make sure other people are happy before you're happy.
Nice.
And that makes you happy, I think, because that's a selfish one, really, but it sounds like it's not a selfish one, so you sound like a really decent human being if you do that. And always tip. Always tip as much as you possibly can. Don't tip more than you can afford, but if you've got more money than the person serving you, make sure you tip and tip well.
I like that, but why?
Because we're all struggling through life, and if you've got money, you have to accept that a lot of it was luck. Everyone worked hard. Everyone who's got money worked hard, but you know what? Everyone who didn't have money worked hard as well, and there's a bit of luck involved. And if you have a bit of luck, then pass some of it along.
What's your greatest strength and your biggest weakness?
Greatest strength, I would say, is I'm fairly level-headed about the world. I don't panic too much about stuff. However bad stuff gets or however good stuff gets, I'm quite good at, it's the Kipling thing of, treating triumph and disaster as imposters. Yeah. I think I'm quite good at that. My biggest weakness would be, because of the way my brain works, I get so impatient if like a computer program won't load, or if suddenly Sky TV goes off or something like that. I can't. I'm so deeply impatient with anything technical, anything that involves process, anything that has is more complicated than me just saying something to somebody. I absolutely can't handle anything like that.
What advice would you give to a teenage Richard just starting out?
I'd say just listen. You've got the right idea. I would say career-wise, you've got the right idea. Life-wise, oh my God, you've got the wrong idea. But listen, there's only one way of finding that out, and that's living through it.
What's the single best piece of advice you've ever received, and why?
My grandfather, who's a police officer, who I loved very, very dearly, gave me a piece of advice, and it's incredibly useful for business, I think. And anyone who's in business will be able to say whether they think it's right or not. My grandfather said, if you're ever called to a fight in a pub, make sure you're second through the door. And that is creatively, if you know that the first mover in pretty much any industry, loses their shirt. And the second movie, everyone goes, "Oh my God, you're a genius. What, electric cars? That's amazing." But, the first person to do it lost billions and billions and billions. So being second through the door is often you're the hero. The first person through the door gets the absolute crap kicked out of them. And then, you wade in and you can be the hero.
And the final question, the thing you'd like to leave ringing in the ears of our audience, your one golden rule for a high-performance life?
I would say, listen, just try and find your true north is what I'd say. Try and live in good faith, and you know the difference already.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. That was
Thank you. I really enjoyed that. It was great. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Richard.